Let's see, it's going live. I forgot to press the button. Okay, so there we go. And in case they didn't hear me earlier, we got Austin, Jacob, James, Scott. We've got Abby over there. We've got all kinds of great people here on YouTube. Also, we've got people here on Crowdcast. All right, Lennon and Tulip and Callie Rowe. And let's see, we've got Amiida and Dylan. All right. Hey, everybody. And remember, best way to get a shout out tonight is I'm going to be checking out Instagram follows here and there. We are going to be doing a little AP Euro review. All right. So as far as that goes, a little AP Euro review, focusing on the era of absolutism and constitutionalism. Now, we might go a little bit outside of that, just depending on how things shape up. But y'all just keep in mind that that's going to be the biggest thing there. That's going to be the focus area. So David Hannon, or David Hannon, however you say that, it's a written test, right? And so with that, let's go ahead and get to questions. Now, first of all, little word from our sponsors, ladies and gentlemen. Romulus Euro is available on the App Store for $2.99. Okay, so Romulus Euro is just a little trivia app that I've come up with. Now, ignore that for whatever reason. This shows something from the American Revolution, but that is not. That's a screenshot from Romulus A Push review. But you can see here, Romulus will allow you to pick like any of these topics and then go and look at. It's going to ask you questions about them. Great little way to study. It's at the App Store and Google Play. Romulus Euro. Also at 9:30 p.m., I'm going to be doing a multiple choice strategy session. Now, that is a premium session. If you are on YouTube, you can see that in the chat. Okay, it's on the YouTube chat. I'm also going to make sure to put a link in the description. I think that I forgot to do that. So let me edit the description real quick. And let's see. So let's see. AP Euro. Let's see. Premium strategy session. Okay, at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so that's going to happen there. So now that is also in the in the video description for YouTube. And Jacob, I'm going to put this link here for you. That's going to be at 9:30. So with that, I'm going to be broadcasting publicly every evening before the exam, tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday at 8:00 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so be sure to do that. And again, I'm going to be doing Instagram shout outs here and there. So with that, do I have any tips on how to simply pass multiple choice? Okay, so as far as that goes, Haley, I'm going to be doing the multiple choice strategy session later. But if you Google the Richey doctrine, you can see that there is a handout that I've made. So that is on the internet. You can Google that. That's going to give you some tips. Now, in the multiple choice strategy session tonight, I'm going to be modeling these. Okay, so I'm going to be going over that. That's just a $10 ticket. I'm going to be going in depth, specifically focusing on strategies for multiple choice. Okay, so that's going to be happening a little later today. So that Richey Doctrine handout, I'll also share that on the YouTube chat. All right, so shout out to Miss Fogarty. All right, so we've got there at SKHS. All right. Thank you so much, Kaylee. Kaylee has bought the Romulus app and is, $2.99. Anyone from Pally over there. So with that, there will be a multiple choice strategy session tonight. One more thing about that session. Participants in that session, I am going to be sharing a link that you can share with your friends if you're a student, or if you are a teacher, you can share it with your students. So for the ticket, there will be an overflow room, a simulcast on YouTube that'll have a private link there, and you can share that with your friends and your students if you're a teacher, so that they can see it as well. So for one ticket, basically your whole class can see the strategy session. So that's something to think about as well. So as far as that, what do I do if I really don't know the answer to an SAQ or an LEQ? Now, for the SAQ, as far as that goes, you're going to try to do the best you can on that. Remember that those are, each graded individually. Okay, so each of these is individual. You've got A, B, and C. So if you don't know one of the A, B, and C's, make sure that you are going to that you're going to get that. If I don't know A or I don't know B, make sure that, focus on C. The thing to keep in mind is in order to pass this exam, if you get 5 out of the 9, so you've got ABC, 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 you don't need to panic if you want, if you don't get all of those. Okay. So it's going to be okay to be able to say, like, look, I don't really know B. I'm not going to focus on that one. Or, if you've got time, just try to answer something. I mean, remember, one of the things to keep in mind is positive scoring. Okay. So when you think about positive scoring is something that basically you never get counted off for something that you say that's wrong. You get counted on for things you say that are right. So if you write enough, you're going to eventually hit something, probably. So that's something to note there. So we've got that. And let's see, are we going to have recorded live session? Yes. As far as that goes, all of these broadcasts, okay, every broadcast that I do, the archive's always available. It's always going to be live, and it's always going to be available through the archive. So with that, how much of the test? The Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. It is about 1/9 of the test. Okay, so as far as that goes, the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration will be about 1/9 of the test. The Age of the Protestant Reformation will be about 1/9 of the test. Okay, so that's something to note. Basically, in the course and exam description, there are 9 units, and each of those units is going to be 1/9 of the test. Okay, so that's something that we're seeing there. So going from there to ensure your evidence is specific enough to get points. Okay, so as far as that goes, how specific do I need to be? Be as specific as possible. Okay, I'm looking at a piece of specific evidence right here. Okay, so you could start talking about neo-impressionism. Okay, you could say something about neo-impressionism and how that went even farther than impressionism in having the creative use of light and color. Okay, and so with that, when we think about this, then it's like Van Gogh's Starry Night. That is an example of neo-impressionism. Okay, so that's something that you want to keep in mind there, that how specific is it? How specific do I need to be, Richie? How specific can you be? And so the thing is, never leave something in your head that could be transferred from your head to the paper. That's something that you want to keep that in mind, that if it's in your head, put it in the paper. Don't be less specific on the paper than you are here. And so act like the reader knows absolutely nothing. That's something that is very important here. And so from there, let's see, who we've got to shout out to. We got some folks here: Nicole Carroll, Natty Delgado, Ryan. We've got Lauren McKenzie, Isaac Lowe, Maddie Brad. Muga is Karen, and let's see, cheesiest Danish. All right, we've got Julian. We've got KLS Hunter, Mac, Harperis, 21, Messiah. I guess Maya. Okay, so playing that soccer over there. I see you got that soccer going. All right, shout out to Sierra High School. All right. So going from there, we've got Avremi, and we've got Lennon Schroeder over there, who is going to make a 5, right? You're going to make a 5. Okay, even went to Europe. Okay, so we've got here, so you can't make any less than a 5 on this exam if you went to Paris. There we go. All right, so going from there, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get on to the next question. Miss Burks, shout out to Miss Burks there, by all means. Okay, so could I compare and contrast absolute monarchies? Okay, so one thing that we need to know here, that we don't want to be too quick to, compare things, but at the same time, like, you could say that both absolute monarchies and totalitarian regimes of the 20th century, that they are, that they're consolidating power. But on the other hand, that, we want to note here that a big difference here is that you don't have like the same kind of preoccupation with private life. Okay, so as far as that goes, just the extent of the propaganda apparatus and the extent of like the secret police and all of these other things. So I wouldn't go too far with that comparison. Okay. I don't think that that's necessarily, I mean, you can make something there, but again, I wouldn't go too far with it. Can I understand the DBQ LEQ prompts more effectively? Okay, so as far as that goes, the DBQ LEQ prompts. How do you know when to take a stance, when to choose both sides? Okay, Luke, the thing is, like the art of this, first of all, shout out to Miss Matthews for being the best history teacher and always bringing it back to Disney. So with that, when we think about like making a stance when to choose both sides, what you do here is you don't choose both sides per se. That you would typically say, I've got this, I'm making this point, but then I also acknowledge that the other side has an argument. Okay, so I think that that is something that is important to think about there. If you're thinking about, for example, in our DBQ clinic, let me see, conservative order, DBQ setup and sample. Okay. And so this is what we did. If you want to see more of the DBQ clinic we did over the weekend, but I'll give you a little snippet of that. That's at crowdcast.io/Tom Richey. We did this DBQ clinic over the weekend. And so when it says something about the conservative order in the early 19th century, what we can see here is I'm organizing the documents. Now, if I'm going for complex understanding, this is what they call a complex split thesis. What I'm going to say here is I've divided the documents into three groups. So, the prompt, it says, evaluate whether or not European elites were successful in establishing a conservative order in the period 1815 to 1850. Now, the way that I'm going to read this, because I don't like the whether or not, I think in terms of, I think it's better to read the prompt as what they're really asking is evaluate the extent to which European elites were successful in establishing a conservative order in the period 1850 to 1850. Okay. So as far as that goes, what I'm going to say here is the conservative order was not successful overall because of nationalist uprisings that happened during this time and the triumph of liberal values in Britain and France. However, a conservative order was established in the German states and in Russia where stronger monarchies existed. So what I'm doing here is I'm answering this question. I'm taking a clear side. I'm saying that overall, the conservative order in Europe, in the assessment that I'm giving here, now, of course, remember that this is argumentative from both sides, okay? So that's what we see there, but then we're going to note here, however, we're going to say that there is an argument to be made here. So we're going to acknowledge that every prompt can be argued from different sides. And so with that, I'm going to make that note, but it's obvious where I'm coming from, and then I'm going with the counter argument. So if you're writing a full credit essay, my advice is to have a 3-paragraph format with 2 of those paragraphs being on the same side and one of them being the counter argument. So as far as that goes, now, of course, we can also do it like this. We can say here, the success of the conservative order and the failure of the conservative order. And with this, I'll just do a standard like split thesis. Conservatives were partly successful in establishing a conservative order in Europe because they used the concert system and censorship to limit rebellions. However, the conservative order failed in some areas because there were some nationalist rebellions during this period. So in this sense, I'm splitting it up, but each of these is supported by evidence. So when it comes down to like, when do I know what side to take or when to split it, it all is based, Luke, on the evidence, okay? So how do you know when to make a stance, when to choose both sides? It's really, on a DBQ especially, you want to think in terms of, okay, have your main argument and then also acknowledge a counter argument. If you were trying to use all of the documents, that's what I'd do there. But as far as if you're just trying to get a 4 out of 7, like that's something that, a 4 out of 7, unless you're trying, if you're trying to make a 4 even, a 4 out of 7 will put you on the path to a 4 on the exam. A 3 out of 7 will put you on a path to where the DBQ is not hurting you, okay? But a 4 out of 7 is a very respectable DBQ if you're trying to get a 3 or a 4. Now, if you're trying to get a 5 on the exam, I would recommend getting at least a score of 6 out of 7 on the DBQ. But as far as a 4-point DBQ, you've got, okay, we've got some things on this side, and we've got some things on that side. Remember, every AP Euro DBQ is going to ask you to weigh in on one side or the other on a historical question. So in this sense, I found a couple documents and a piece of outside evidence to go for the success of the conservative order. Then I've got here a couple of documents with the failure of the conservative order. So thesis statement. Then we've got one body paragraph that's focusing on the failure, on the successes, another one that's focusing on the failures, and then I restate the thesis. Now, this 4-point DBQ can be turned into a 5-point DBQ very easily by adding some historical context there at the top. So this is something that, you know, you've really got a lot of ways to get to 4 or 5 points, but it's really your argument. The most important thing is to be supported by evidence. Now, here's the thing. What we want to note here that the thesis statement can be, the rubric says one or more sentences located in one place, either in the introduction or the conclusion. So as far as that goes, you do not have to be limited to one sentence. There have been some times where I have used a 3-sentence thesis. Okay, I've used a 3-sentence thesis before. So that's something to think. Now, 4-sentence thesis, probably more than you need, but as long as it's in the, as long as those sentences are together and they make a thesis, that's it. It does not limit how many. The Albert I.O. score calculator, I am a big fan of Albert I.O. So yes, Dylan, I think that it is pretty accurate. And so that is something that, yeah, I would not hesitate to use. So with that, so for pacing, pacing tips. Now, the thing is, y'all are asking a lot of questions about writing. And what is concerning me about this is that at this point, if you don't know how to write, if you haven't, I mean, this is an exam that is supposed to be prepared for. So it's a little bit concerning that I'm getting those questions, because at this point, you're not going, now you can improve your writing a bit, okay, between now and the exam. But in this sense, I would be trying to spend a lot of time reviewing content at this point. So with this, hi, I'm Ryan. Can I get a shout out for me and the best teacher ever, Mr. McGee? All right. So, so as far as that goes, Amilda, when we're thinking about the advice on contextualization, okay, what I say about contextualization is typically I'll mention what I call the proximity relevance axis. Oh, whoa, they've got another Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer. My goodness. 1 month from today. Okay, well, actually, it's less than 1 month, right? So that was, yeah. So now they're going to be releasing the Obi-Wan Kenobi trailer on what would have been the Obi-Wan Kenobi, the first 2 episodes of the series. It's going to be on what would have been Harambe's 23rd birthday. Rest in peace. Okay, so as far as that goes, all right. So Amilda, contextualization. I always think in terms of the proximity relevance axis. Okay, so what I call the proximity relevance axis is basically there are 2 things about whatever you pick for contextualization. Typically, you're going to pick something that's close to the period, and then you also are going to pick something that's relevant. Now, being close to the period has no purpose if it's not also relevant. Now, sometimes if something's super relevant, then it may be something where you can dump the proximity principle. But what you're usually looking for is something that's close by and it's relevant. So for example, if we're thinking about the conservative order, like if the prompt is about the conservative order that's established after 1815, let's think about this. Okay, if we think about the conservative order starting in 1815, what are we going to see on the proximity relevance axis? Okay, Yes, so the premium DBQ clinic over the weekend, yes. If you go to crowdcast.io/Tom Richey, you can, that's a 2-hour clinic. Okay. So the thing is, that thing is very, very heavy. I go deep into document analysis. I set up like a 4 out of 7 DBQ, and then I set up a 7 out of 7 DBQ. So as far as that, yeah, I mean, I go through all of the documents. And then, in a lot of detail. So what we see here is if the DBQ is on the conservative order, then the proximity relevance axis would suggest that I would go to the French Revolution, because the French Revolution is close to that period, very close. And the French Revolution and Napoleon, that is the whole reason the conservative order is established in the first place. So what we see here, we see that the French Revolution gives us high proximity and high relevance. Okay. And so what we see here is I'm looking for 3 to 4 content-rich sentences. So in 1789, Louis XVI convened the Estates General, which was an assembly that was divided into between the clergy, the nobility, and the Third Estate, everyone else. Third Estate delegates walked out of the Estates General in order to create the National Assembly, claiming that only the nation had the right to make laws. They also passed the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which declared everyone free and equal. Okay. And so we see here, after several wars, Napoleon and France were defeated and conservatives took power in Europe. Now, I might even expand it one more sentence to say here that the French Revolution, kind of to give it a little bit more oomph there, the French Revolution represented the ideas of liberalism and nationalism, okay, which were the same ideas that conservatives feared, okay, or something like that. And so we're going to note here that after several wars, Napoleon and France were defeated, conservatives took power in Europe. So contextualization, again, the proximity relevance axis, and the biggest test for like good contextualization. Now, to be clear, you don't have to take contextualization from immediately before. I just find that 9 times out of 10, it works best. You can contextualize within the paragraphs. Like really, sometimes people, if you use enough outside evidence, like if you were to use 2 or 3 pieces of outside evidence, odds are the reader's going to be like, you know what, I'm going to count this one piece, if it's substantive enough, as contextualization. But I find that 9 times out of 10, remember that your reader could read this essay at 5 after 8, like 8 in the morning. They were out till like 2 a.m. drinking, and they have their coffee hasn't kicked in yet, and they're just like, and then it's like, okay, now they're grading. You want to make it as easy for the reader as possible. So I think that putting contextualization at the beginning is a great practice, because first of all, this is where the reader is really naturally expecting to find it. And this will set you up so that you have 2 points already by the time you get past the first paragraph. Okay, so that's something that you want to note there. So with that, now remember the premium DBQ session has already happened, but you can purchase the archive, session. But with that, remember we've got the multiple choice strategy session at 9:30. But you can still go back and view the DBQ session. All right. So are there any specific dates that we should know in detail, especially for this unit? Okay, so first of all, like 1648, that's of course the Peace of Westphalia. One thing to note here is that Charles, if you're thinking about dates, like we want to note that the English Civil War is going on at the same time as the last phase of the 30 Years' War. And so Charles I, he gets his head chopped off in 1649. And then 40 years later, 1689, that is when you have the Glorious Revolution. Okay, so that's something that the Glorious Revolution, is 40 years after the Peace of Westphalia. It's like 1648 versus 1688-89. Another thing you might want to note is by 1715, that is the end of Louis XIV's wars. Okay, so if we think about the Peace of Utrecht, as the Dutch would say, Utrecht, That is like, that's a 1713. Now notice here, I said 1715. If you're just a few, years off, not that big of a deal. Okay. So as far as that, I don't know if I would say like there is a major, like the 1648 date, and then a year later, Charles the First gets his head cut off. Then yeah, 30 Years' War ends in 1648. That's a big deal to know. And then if you think about like going 40 years after that, that's the Glorious Revolution. And also the Glorious Revolution in some ways is kind of the start of the Enlightenment. Okay, it's kind of the start of the Enlightenment. So with that, now I would say here, MJ, the way that I would tackle this on the writing section, I would always do the, I would do the DBQ before the LEQ. But if we think about this 2021 AP Euro free response, okay, so let me show you kind of what I would do if I were going into the DBQ and the LEQ. Okay, so going with that. And yeah, the Treaty of Westphalia ended the 30 Years' War. So what I would do is first, I would look at the LEQ prompts. Okay, I would look at the prompts, because how strong I anticipate my LEQ being, that's going to be a big deal in terms of deciding how much time I need to write my LEQ. So the thing is, evaluate the most significant effect of the printing press 1450 to 1650. Okay, looks like a good one. Evaluate the most significant effect of the Enlightenment on European society. Now note here, this is something that we need to think about, because this is a very open-ended prompt. It just asks for the most significant effect of the printing press. Now, remember, the first, the LEQ2, the first LEQ is always going to come from the so-called period one. Always, okay? Always going to come from the so-called period one. And the 3 and 4, they'll always come from 2, 3, and 4. So there's always going to be an LEQ from the early part. But you notice here, the printing press, I'm getting carte blanche here. I just have to go into any significant effect of the printing press or effects, and then evaluate the most significant effect of the Enlightenment on European society. Now here, it has to be on European society, okay? So during the period 1688 to 1815. And so with that, that could get a little messy. Because now, of course, I would go somewhere with the French Revolution, I believe, there, like the end of the old regime and that sort of thing. But since it says on European society, it's limiting it a bit. Now, then evaluate the most significant cultural effect of the First World War. Not the most significant effect of the First World War, but the most significant cultural effect during the period 1918-1939. So when I'm looking at this, the printing press to me looks like a no-brainer. That's what most students picked last year, because not only is it a familiar topic, but it's something that is very open-ended. So when we think about the printing press, we're thinking about, okay, that is the printing press is the Renaissance, the spread of the Renaissance beyond the Alps to Northern Europe, the Reformation, Martin Luther having the 95 Theses printed, and also when you look at the Scientific Revolution, okay, that is, that's something to note as well. Okay, so going with, going with that, we've got this here. So with that, let's go ahead and, we pick that one, and then I would go and do the DBQ. Okay, so I would take a look at the LEQ prompts. I would decide which one I'm going to write, and then I would go from there. Okay, so that would be how I would look at, how I would look at this. So with that, as we go along here, that's how I would do it. So hopefully that explained things to y'all a little bit there. So are there any specific, so we've done that. Hey, Tom, huge fan. All right, good to see that. So I have a general understanding of all topics, not the intricacies. Okay. So with that, how can I remember all these intricacies? The thing is, you just need to, delve into it a little deeper. I would say that my Reformation videos, they tend to go deep into the theology. So that's the main thing. Now, again, I think that it can't hurt. Okay, it can't hurt to know as much as you can. I mean, you'd rather go into this with a surplus of knowledge than not as much. So with that, now one thing I would note, Maddie, I am not a big fan of the Princeton review books. They have not been updated in ages. Now we're getting a little bit close to the exam, but I think that it's still not too late if you want to order my favorite prep book. Okay, my favorite prep book for AP Euro, and actually the only prep book that I directly endorse for any subject is Chris Freiler's AP Achiever. Okay, Chris Freiler's AP Achiever. That's something that that as far as we see that Chris Freiler's AP Achiever, that is on Amazon, and you should be able to, if you order that tonight, probably get it delivered to you by Wednesday. So with that, just keep that in mind. The Princeton Review Guide, I would definitely not. I would not write an essay from that book. I would not, I mean, if somebody gave me that book, I would use it for like Kindling or something. So with that, major cause of the Glorious Revolution. Okay, now the thing is, if Carson Webster has evidence to point that out, now I've never heard of feminism as a cause of the Glorious Revolution, but as far as that goes, yeah, I just, do you have evidence to back it up? That would be it there. Do you have evidence to back it up? Okay, any tips for differentiating Eastern and Western absolutism? Well, take a look at a map of Europe and go from there. So basically, absolutism in Western Europe, we're talking about France, okay, and also the failed absolutist experiment in Britain. Now, Eastern Europe, the best example of Eastern Europe, Peter the Great, Russian Tsar, might have heard of me. Warm water port, yeah, that's where I want to be. European tour, going west, want to come with me? I'd rather die than have an overrunning me. Shave that beard, show me them lips. Better grab a hammer because I'm building ships, sailing down to Azov for a campaign. Turks couldn't hold the place after I came. I got a warm water port, ruling absolutely. Wear French fashions in my court, ruling absolutely. Yes, that's me in that book you're reading. That AP Achiever book you're reading, ruling absolutely, defeating Charles the 12th of Sweden, ruling absolutely. When it comes to King, now that was Eastern Europe, okay? Eastern Europe is Peter the Great, okay? Then when it comes to kings, I ain't mediocre. In Western Europe, I'm the power broker. Dutch Republic, I'm gonna run you over with English allies, Treaty of Dover. Charles needed money. Let's see, Charles needed money. He was indebted. All those mistresses ruined his credit. Nobles with swords, I ain't sympathetic. But, I make new nobles and they ain't genetic. Give me some art. Make it Baroque. Edict of Nantes. I'm a revoke. I want one king, one law, one faith. That's what I said you can quote. Once fought a war over Spanish succession. The Grand Alliance don't like my aggression. They thought they could win, but they couldn't outshine me. Now at Utrecht, and now they want to sign me. Woo! Now that is Western Europe. That's Louis the 14th. That is Western Europe, okay? Westernizing Russia without ceasing, so that is, now that's the thing too, when you look at Peter the Great, he's westernizing. So Louis the 14th wouldn't westernize, right? So westernizing Russia without ceasing. Orthodox Church of the religion I believe in, that I get a little bit shaky there. It's been a little while. So with that, is it in Eastern Europe or is it in Western Europe? So when you think about this, you've got Louis the 14th in Western Europe. You've of course got Britain is in Western Europe. When we're thinking about Prussia, absolutist Prussia, that's what we call Central Europe. And then Peter the Great. Now it is on SoundCloud, okay, on SoundCloud, and the music video is on YouTube, okay? So that's, you can find my WAP parody is on my SoundCloud, and it is here, it is on my YouTube channel. So if you put ruling absolutely WAP parody, okay, so ruling absolutely WAP parody, okay, so so as far as that goes, that's what we're looking at. So basically, now are Louis the 14th and Peter the Great the only two major absolutists? They're not, but I would say that they are the best ones. Okay, they're the best ones to have those examples. Oh my goodness, there have been some, oh man, my man JB with that with that super chat. Okay, I tell you, JB is, is reminding me I got to spend more time on here. I appreciate that, guy. And so as far as that, and it looks like Jacob did a super chat as well. So Jacob, thank you so much for the super chat on YouTube. Much love there. Now, was England the only country to become constitutional at this time? No, the Dutch Republic would also qualify as constitutional. Okay, so what we want to note there, now the video that I would watch on the Dutch Republic, I have a video lecture called What is a Stadtholder? Okay, and in that video, I go into basically the Dutch Republic and the kind of chaos that you've got here. So basically, if we're thinking about absolutism, it's did the monarch manage to secure full authority in the monarchical administration? Okay, so did the crown consolidate authority? And so basically, in the Dutch Republic, you can't do it because the Dutch Republic are this is something that is they're not even united. You've got like these different provinces. So basically the Dutch Republic has this very interesting constitution. So yeah, so there are plenty of not necessarily plenty, but I would say that Britain and the Dutch Republic, those are two places where you've got the you've got that you've got constitutionalism. So can you shout out to my teacher, Mr. Little, plays the videos. Thank you so much, Mr. Little. English Civil War. Okay, so as far as the English Civil War, it doesn't really answer a whole lot. What we want to think of when we look at the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. This starts with this period of Stuart absolutism. Now, I have a very exhaustive lecture series on the Stuarts, okay? So you can actually watch that. I think the whole thing's more than an hour long. You will learn, you'll be an expert on all this if you commit all that, if you can learn all that. So as far as that goes here, let me note here. So what we want to think about with the Glorious Revolution, that under the Tudors, you remember when Henry VIII, he wanted to leave the Church of England. Scratch that. He wanted to leave the Catholic Church and establish the Church of England. So he calls Parliament together. Okay, he calls Parliament together and says that hey, I want to leave the Catholic Church. I want Parliament to rubber stamp this. So during the Tudors, Parliament was called by the monarch and it was dispersed by the monarch. And it was basically like the monarch needs a group of people to come in and pat him on the back and say he's right or she's right. Elizabeth called parliaments. And so James the First, he was really one of the first monarchs to try the absolutist system. I mean, this is before Louis the 14th. So when you look here, you've got the Stuarts, you've got James the First, Charles the First, and Charles II, James II, J1, C1, C2, J2. It sounds almost like a Star Wars droid. Maybe we should be talking about this on Wednesday. But with this, think about like a mirror image here, because when you've got Cromwell here splitting them up with the interregnum, you've got, the Charleses there in the middle, and then the Jameses are on the outside. So James the First, Charles the First, Charles II, James the Second. So James the First and Charles the First, they are both trying to rule absolutely. Okay, so both of them are trying to rule absolutely like Peter the Great or Louis the 14th, but they're not Peter the Great or Louis the 14th. And so the central issue here is Parliament has this authority tax that you like to approve taxation that goes all the way back to the Middle Ages. Okay, and so as far as that goes all the way back to the Middle Ages. And so that's something that is, that is important to kind of think about, that who has the authority to tax. And so the monarch, basically, James the First and Charles the First, they're hoping that we are going to, that they're going to be able to just, that they're going to be able to tax by decree, because that's what an absolute ruler does. An absolute ruler does not rely on a representative body. And then the state religion. Okay, so is the monarch going to control the state religion? Now, we want to note here that this is not just Catholics versus Protestants. This is also Protestants versus Protestants. Okay, so you've got the Church of England versus these, versus these Calvinist groups. So the state problems with the state religion, and also the idea of sovereignty. Is sovereignty in the monarch? Does the monarch, have full sovereignty, or does the monarch have to share sovereignty with Parliament? if you want to alliterate, which I like to alliterate, you think about Protestantism and Parliament. These are two things that are very important there. And so with that, James the First, he's trying to assert divine right, the divine right of kings. He's trying to control the state religion and to mandate religious uniformity. Okay, so everyone in England must belong to the Church of England. That's causing some problems. Now, then, you've got these Puritans and separatists, these English Calvinists, who they believe, remember, Henry VIII didn't have any fundamental problems with, with the Catholic Church per se, except for political problems. And so Puritans and separatists, they believed that the Church of England was too Catholic. Okay, these were these English Calvinists. And so with that, Charles I tries to continue his father's program of absolutism. And you can see here on this coin, you've got here basically Christo auspice regno, by the auspices of Christ, I reign. Okay. Now, the big thing that happens when Charles in Parliament is, got to be careful how I pronounce this, ship money, okay, which members of Parliament might have had another word for it, because basically ship money, all right, this is something that Charles, basically English monarchs like Parliament had previously said, yes, there is a tax that is collected from the coastal cities in order to protect, maritime commerce. And the reason why the coastal cities were the ones that paid this tax is they were the ones that benefited from commerce. Like the interior, villages and cities and towns, they didn't pay for ship money because their economies didn't directly benefit. So basically, coastal cities, they paid ship money. And Charles decided, you know what? I'm just going to collect this tax from everybody in England. And Parliament's like, you can't do that. You got to get Parliament's permission. And, Charles is like, well, it's not a real, it's not a new tax. And so there are things, one of these things was the petition of right. This is something where the Parliament, they said, here are all of the abuses of power. And Charles actually received the petition because he was in a situation where he kind of, was forced into receiving it, or else he was going to have a rebellion. He received it, but proceeded not to really do anything with it. That Charles, for 11 years, did not call Parliament. Okay, so this was his period of personal rule. And then finally, in 1640, he needed money. He called Parliament. You have what's called the Short Parliament, because Charles called it, and then he dismissed it. And then you've got the Long Parliament, where Charles called it, he tried to dismiss it, they kept sitting. And so the English Civil War from 1642 to 1651, you've got the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. The Cavaliers would be the supporters of the king. The Roundheads were the supporters of the Long Parliament. And so with that, the English Civil War, one of the big things there is Charles got his head cut off. And then you've got this period of the Protectorate or Interregnum. And this is a period where basically Cromwell is ruling along with the Rump Parliament. Now, Rump Parliament means exactly what you think it means, basically the hindquarters, okay? That what happened was that Parliament was purged, the Long Parliament was purged of everyone who was not loyal to Cromwell. And this is something, when you're comparing the English Civil War and the French Revolution, this is something that this is kind of like that radical phase here. And so you have Protestant toleration, but also like a period where they're de-Catholicizing the Anglican Church. They try to get rid, you sing that song about the 12 days of Christmas, and you're like, why are we singing about the 12 days of Christmas? Christmas used to literally be a 12-day festival, because think about it, in an agricultural society, you can't plant anything, you can't harvest anything. Sounds like as good of a time as anything just to have a festival in the middle of winter. And so there used to be 12 days of Christmas. Now, that's not something that the Puritans like, because that makes people lazy and that makes people drunk and all of these other things that the Puritans don't like. So they tried to get rid of Christmas, which literally means, if you think about it, Christmas literally means Christ's Mass, okay? I mean, it's got its origins as a Catholic holiday, Christ's Mass. And so they wanted to call it Christide, okay? And then they wanted to ban things like cockfighting. So once, Oliver Cromwell dies, they end up inviting Charles II to come rule, who was Charles I's son. So this is the restoration. Charles II and his brother James II. Charles II had a whole bunch of kids. The problem is for him, none of them were legitimate. So he comes back from exile. Charles II is the Merry Monarch, and the little Charles II Spaniels, those are actually the King Charles King Charles Cavalier Spaniel. That is actually named for Charles II. And so Charles II, he issues a declaration of indulgence. He basically says that he's not going to enforce laws against Catholics and nonconformists. So he's not going to be so rigid on religion as his father and grandfather were. Now, the only problem is that Parliament wanted him to be a bit more rigid, because this is a time when on the European continent, you have a resurgence of Catholicism. And then, but in Britain, and when we think about things like Brexit, the things where Britain is kind of Europe, but not really. I mean, they're not on the continent there. They have different outlet plugs. They still, measure in pints and miles. Like, people say they've abandoned that system, but when you actually go to England, you see they still use all that stuff. They talk about feet and miles and pints and all of that kind of stuff. So they say, oh, not even the British use this system. They actually do. Like, colloquially, they totally do. And so with that, you've got entrenched Protestantism here, and Parliament passes the Test Acts, okay, that basically they want the king to make sure that people in positions of public trust are Anglicans. And so what happens here is the Test Acts, every office holder, everyone in a position of public trust had to receive communion in the Anglican Church. And so with that, we want to note here that, you see here that Charles, is kind of a libertine. Like, his court, there's a Johnny Depp movie called The Libertine that's set in, Charles II's court. And so what happens is, Charles becomes friends with Louis, he's close to Louis XIV. Charles has some secret sympathies with Catholicism. And in the secret Treaty of Dover, what happens is Louis gives Charles some money, because Charles needs money to support all these illegitimate children, these living expenses of his. And so Louis and Charles are going to double team the Dutch. And then Charles will convert to Catholicism if an opportune time presents itself. And an opportune time presented itself on Charles's deathbed. Okay, so basically on his deathbed. Now, James II didn't wait till his deathbed. And James, was an open papist, okay, or a Catholic. This is a British slur at the time for somebody who was Catholic. And so basically they tried to keep him from being king. That didn't work. Now, I'm going through this pretty quickly. I've got a version of this lecture on my YouTube channel, okay? So it's a 4-part lecture. It's very, it's very thorough. And so with that, basically James II suspends the Test Acts. He issues another declaration of indulgence that he's not going to enforce laws against Catholics and nonconformists. And he says this has to be read in the churches. Basically, he wanted this declaration of indulgence read in the Anglican churches so that people sitting in the pews in the Anglican churches, they know that they don't have to be there. And so, there he was challenged by bishops. And then, James says, God has given me this dispensing power and I will maintain it. Sounds a lot like the divine right of kings. And so with that, there are grievances here that James II has used cruel and unusual punishments. He's suspended laws passed by Parliament. He's intimidated bishops. He's invoked divine right. And then he has a son. And when the English are confronted with the idea of a Catholic dynasty, they're like, no. And so they reach out to William III, the Prince of Orange, who was the stadtholder of Holland, Zeeland, Utrecht, Gelderland, and Overijssel. Okay, so he was a stadtholder in the Dutch Republic. And so he was somebody, this is kind of gross, but, basically, Charles I of England, you had James II of England, then his daughter married William II of Orange, so you got William III of Orange. So basically, William III of Orange and Mary Stuart, they were first cousins. Well, sounds like sounds like they can get married. So they're both like grandchildren of Charles I. And so England, they want somebody who will sit down and shut up, let Parliament do the governing. And so with this, we see that, basically, William invades England at the invitation of Parliament. So basically, the Glorious Revolution, James is run off and the throne is declared vacant. Now, the English, they sometimes call it the Glorious and Bloodless Revolution because there was no blood in England, but there was blood spilled in Ireland and in Scotland. Okay, so what happens here? You've got, William III and Mary II who rule as joint monarchs. And now that's not so good for Louis XIV because now the Dutch stadtholder is also the King of England. That creates an Anglo-Dutch alliance against Louis XIV. And of course, that's something the Glorious Revolution, on top of changing the English system of government, it also tilts the balance of power because now the Dutch and the British are both allied against Louis. So the English Bill of Rights in 1689, William and Mary signed this, and basically they agreed to a limitation of their power, and they acknowledged the lawmaking authority of Parliament. And so that's where, James, the big statement of grievances there, and then a Declaration of Rights, which some things, have in common with our Bill of Rights. And also one of the things here that it says that a papist or anyone married to a papist cannot reign in Britain. So, this is something that influenced the U.S. Bill of Rights. And one thing we want to note here is parliamentary supremacy. Okay, so as a result of the English Bill of Rights, it is generally agreed upon that Parliament will make laws. Okay, and so as far as that goes, now technically the monarch will still claim to be the sovereign, but Parliament, for all practical purposes, has sovereignty, and Britain has a ceremonial monarchy. R.I.P. Prince Andrew, Prince Philip. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to insult Prince Philip there. Prince Andrew, that's, Prince Philip, rest in peace. But Britain has a largely ceremonial monarchy, largely as a legacy of the Glorious Revolution. So as far as that goes, let's see what we've got. Oh, that Habsburg chin. Yes, 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 yes. So as far as that goes, what do I recommend? Okay, so the thing is, you don't have to learn every absolute ruler. I tend to focus on Louis XIV, Peter the Great, and knowing a bit about the Fredericks in Prussia. Now, in Prussia, I would not try to memorize all these different Fredericks. Prussia has like these rulers that they're either named Frederick, William, or Frederick William. Okay, I mean, that's basically, so understand about Prussian absolutism, and then know what's going on with the English Civil War and the Glorious Revolution. But you don't need to learn like every single ruler that's ever lived or anything like that. Mercantilism. Now, keep in mind that I've got a video about mercantilism, so that's something that you want to keep in mind there. Mercantilism is basically about at the root of it is that wealth is measured in gold and silver. Now, that's something that Adam Smith is going to dispute later on when he writes Wealth of Nations, okay? And so say hi to Mr. Raskin's class. All right, we got Bobby Lewis there in the YouTube chat, and Cassandra. Thank y'all so much. And, just remember, everybody, that we're going to be wrapping this up in a little bit, and at 9:30, I'm going to be, hey there, Gabriella. So with that, Frederick the Great, enlightened absolutism. So that's something that's going to be happening. And also, I'll do another round of Instagram shout outs before I stop the broadcast. So at Tom Richey, if you want an Instagram shout out. So mercantilism. Adam Smith's going to dispute this in Wealth of Nations. But mercantilism starts with the idea that gold and silver, that is the basis of wealth. So what I need to do is I need to maintain my gold and silver. And in order to do that, we need to avoid importing from other countries, because when we import goods, we give, we have to pay with gold and silver. So mercantilism is about the government taking some control of the economy. Now, it's a capitalist economy, but the government is taking some control of the economy, directing things, creating a manufacturing sector in the mother country, and establishing colonies. So one of the big things about mercantilism is having colonies, and you trade with the colonies. Yes, okay, must obtain bullion from weaker nations. Yes, 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 yes. All right, so as far as that goes, and again, I will refer you to my proper lecture on mercantilism. We always want to associate Jean-Baptiste Colbert, Louis XIV's finance minister. Okay, so he's somebody that's very, that's very important there. As far as that goes, tainted meat, TWD. The first and second industrial revolutions, if you look up my video lecture on the second industrial revolution, you'll see that. Okay. Do we actually have to do the written portion in pen? I would say here that a pen is highly recommended, because as a former reader, I would note that, a pencil, it's not always going to have the clarity. So the risk you take when you write in pencil is it may not be as clear. The reader's not going to read this for a month after you take it. And so it is definitely going to be safe to use a black or blue ink pen, or if you've got a color like purple or something like that, just a dark ink pen. Okay, that as far as that goes, as long as it's a dark, easily visible ink pen. So if it's dark green or dark purple or something like that, so with that, just keep that in mind. So ladies and gentlemen, this is something, can I please post? Let's see. So with that, I'm going to be back. Remember, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be broadcasting, public live for AP Euro. Now, remember that this review has been brought to you by Romulus Euro. Romulus Euro is available at the App Store and at Google Play. We got it at number 27 right now. It's a handy little trivia app that is going to help you prepare for the, for the exam. It's at both the App Store and the Google Play Store. Now, also remember that we're going to have a multiple choice strategy session at 9:30, and I'm going to get pretty deep in. We're going to model. Now, remember I shared earlier, you can Google the Richey doctrine. Okay, you can Google the Richey doctrine, and that's there. That is a document out there. But in this session, I'm going to be actually modeling what we're going to do and effective strategies. I'm going to be answering questions. It's going to be a small group. Okay, so with that, now let's do another round of Instagram shout outs here. Let's see who our new Instagram supporters are. Becca Com, okay, 29 seconds ago. Ben, Emery and Sid. We've got Karina is sleepy. How sleepy are you, Karina? Hopefully you get some rest before that exam. KVNG Santee. We've got iCaged Form, Maya B. Hasker, Martic 5721, Aaron Shaler. We've got Avalo, Cassandra, Natalie. We've got Cass Hudson. We've got Sophia over there. St. Pablo, and then Love Bella with 2 1s there. So Bella's got the 2 1s, and we've got Julian and let's see. Erilyn, Crystal, and let's see, T-Lust 27, Calamac, and Okie Oats. That's fun there. Okie Oats. That's just got a really nice ring to it. Thank you, Beth Z. Ramirez, Austin, Fabian. Let's see, Julia Yachty, Yana Lit 23. Thank y'all so much for the support. And ladies and gentlemen, just remember that I'm going to, I'm going to be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern. So, and remember, there's all kinds of stuff out there on YouTube. Take a look at some of those videos if you want a more thorough explanation. And Mr. Buchanan, Kelly Buchanan, yes, out there in California. Yes, excellent. And shout out to Mr. Borgeson. Okay, let's see if there's anybody to shout out from. Miss Woodard's class from PHS. Okay, and so Peter the Great. Now I've got a whole lecture on Peter the Great. I would definitely recommend y'all take a look at that. And so with that, thank you. Thank you there, Kaylee. Glad to do that. Mr. B, giving Mr. B a shout out. and Paris High School, and Corinna in that group there, Mr. Beatty. All right, and remember, I'm going to be here, 3 more days, so there will be some more shout outs. But from tonight, we're going to shout out to Mr. Abreu and, of course, Miss Feast at Kenosha Christian Life School, Mr. Teague, and we're going to continue tomorrow. 8 p.m. And I'll see some of y'all. Remember, if you get into the premium multiple choice session, you can share the link with your friends. There's going to be a simulcast and you can share it with your friends. Always a pleasure.